Hi, this is Laura Holyoke, and I have a quick PowerPoint for you going over in more detail your HRD Self-Development Project. So the deliverables, and I call them a portfolio, I've broken down into 3 areas. One of those areas is from your viewpoint, which will include your summary, overview, highlights of the book, the HRD issue that connects with your book, and then how you're going to apply your newfound learning. The second part of the deliverables will be about the HRD process, which will include the identified learning needs, learning outcomes, design, and evaluation. Finally, the third part will be workshop materials and content for the workshop. I've called it several things, I think, and my apologies for doing that. I called it a workshop, I've called it a training, I've called it a course. Please think of all 3 of them as the same for purposes of this assignment. The workshop materials will include handouts that you have for your participants to take home, any learning activity with instructions, and then composed presentation. So I'm going to go over this more in detail. So from your viewpoint, first off will be a 2 to 4 page highlights, overview, summary of the book, whichever you choose to call this. So the summary is think about what is the author's message. In other words, what is the book about? And then what topics or themes stood out to you? And helpful to include any quotes that support your highlights of the book and what you may use in the future. So this is a paper of sorts that should be well organized, written in paragraph form for the most part. Your headings, for purposes of organization, I think using headings is a good idea. And please make sure that you cite your quotations, a page from the book. The second part of from your viewpoint is 1 to 2 paragraphs of what HRD issue will your training workshop address. It may be the issue, or sometimes, I just going to call them issues. So the issue may be communication, it may be feedback, it may be the learning environment, could be ethics, could be generations in the workplace, culture of the workplace, performance, teamwork, etc. You have a wide variety to choose from here. I want to back up a quick second. You can also find how much each of these are worth in a rubric of sorts from on our class website. So 500 points total, because this is 50% of your grade. The 2 to 4 page overview or summary is worth 100 points. This part from your viewpoint, the paragraphs, are worth 25 points. And then the third part from your viewpoint will be a 1 to 2 page plan of how you will apply what you learned from the book. This is your action plan. Tell me what you will do to apply it, how you will apply. It might be teaching others, it might be repetition for you, it might be a checklist of sorts, it could be an application. This can also be something that you build into your learning activity. That last part is worth 75 points. So the middle part of your project is information about the workshop or training that shows your HRD process. This total is worth 100 points, 25 points apiece for the learning needs, the design, learning outcomes, and then the evaluation. So identifying learning needs. I want you to approach this as if you've already identified learning needs, and they really should be the kind of needs that your book supports. So think about if you've already completed a needs analysis, what your project is, and then what is needed by the people. That's going to be the same thing. It's also going to relate to the HRD issue you are addressing, and who or what is your target audience. So you may need to explain a little bit who would make the good participants. What is it that they need to learn? The second part of the HRD process includes learning outcomes, which are brief, precise statements that describe and define what the learner is expected to know, be able to do as a result of your training. These are found on page 139, and it also talks about them being SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time, how much time it'll take. Please, in your write-up, show how each of your 2 learning objectives are SMART. The next part is your design process. So think of this as sort of strategy, delivery methods, the structure, and the duration of your training. So you'll explain the learning content and strategy. You may want to use a table or chart here of sorts for maybe the structure and sequence. So the types of learning content, you can find that on page 141. The learning strategy you will use and why. And then finally, the delivery method. This is somewhat of structure and sequence. That's on page 142 and 143. And then evaluation. So how will you determine if the learning outcomes were met, or the learning objectives in this case? And then what else is important to know? I'd like for you to explain your evaluation method and to then give examples of the questions you will ask. The last part of the project is the development of course or training materials, and then the training content, if you will. This is 3 different pieces worth 200 points total. The first one is any handouts that you have, maybe a cheat sheet, maybe visuals that you use during training that the participants can take home. This is worth 25 points. Second is a learning activity, and to include, for this, please include instructions for the activity as if you were providing instructions for somebody else to conduct the training. This may or may not have handouts associated with it. And then finally, a composed presentation, and this is worth 150 out of the 200 points here. So my guess was this is where a lot of people will spend, or people will spend your most time. And make your slideshow worth viewing. So I recommend referring to different best practices or tips from the internet in terms of putting together your slideshow. You can use different kinds of software, but it does need to be polished and ready for presentation. I went over that pretty quickly. I'm hoping that I believe on Wednesday that I'm hosting a discussion, so if you have questions, you can ask me then. Thanks so much.